Hello and welcome to my channel. This image is a little bit different, so I'm going to do two different kinds of themes and we'll see how we go for time on them. So it turns out that this is, well, it's not necessarily a haunted house, but it's an old kind of manor style house and it's got some gravestones in the front, and I thought let's do some haunted house facts and some graveyard facts. So let's take you around the world. These are 30 facts from, well, these are actually 30 nightmarish stories or haunted places, and I think these are from around the world. So the first one is, the Maple Hill Cemetery was built in 1882 in Huntsville, Alabama, which makes it the oldest burial site in the town. The cemetery spreads across a massive 100 acres. In the 1960s, multiple children went missing and their bodies were dumped at the playground that is right next to the cemetery. Locals say that around 10 p.m. every night, the swings will rock and slide, will groan under an invisible weight. The sound of children's giggling can also be heard in the darkness. That's a little bit sad. Now, the next one says that in the 17th century, the Dutch East India Company built a massive Castle of Good Hope in Cape Town, South Africa. The edifice allows traders to have a place to rest during their travels. For a while, people reported seeing a ghostly apparition of a woman they called the Lady in Grey sobbing. The employees of the castle decided to dig in the area where the ghost was seen. Sure enough, the body of a woman has been buried at the site. Once she was exhumed and given a proper burial, the hauntings allegedly stopped. This heading is, I failed you. In the end of World War II, Japan surrendered to the United States. Legend has it that a large number of Japanese pilots committed harikari, or ritual suicide, for their failure to serve the emperor. Now people say that the Atsugi Hangar Bay is haunted by the ghosts of these men. People have reported seeing red eyes floating in the night. It's a little creepy. Poveglia Island in Italy was used to quarantine people with the bubonic plague in the 14th century. Thousands of people died excruciatingly painful deaths on the island. In 1630, when a recurrence of the disease spread through Italy, the government again sent the bodies to Poveglia Island. The island is now abandoned and locals avoid it, well, like the plague. In Limerick, County Ireland, Rachel, is home to the ancient ruins of 13th century St. Catherine's Abbey, where nuns lived and prayed. Legend has it one nun was secretly working with the devil. One day the other nuns found her sitting in a chair. She was dead, her eyes were open, her face was contorted in a scream of horror. The nuns claimed that the devil finally came for her soul. Jack the Ripper was a vicious serial killer who brutally slaughtered women in London in the 1880s. On 29 Hanbury Street, the body of a decapitated woman, one of Jack's victims, was found. Years later, a brewery opened in the same spot where she died. People say that they sometimes see the figure of a decapitated woman walking at night, searching for her killer. The Akigahara forest sits on the edge of Mount Fuji in Japan. The forest is beautiful and mysterious, filled with lush vegetation and twisting trees. Since the 1950s, over 500 people have committed suicide in these woods, earning it the name the Suicide Forest. Every so often, the police sweep the forest to collect the bodies of suicide victims. Those who visit the woods to hike will see evidence of nooses and random belongings of those who died. Oh, wow. During the 1700s in Louisiana, a slave girl named Chloe was noticed by her master, Judge Clark Woodruff, for her good looks. She was asked to leave the fields of Myrtle's plantation to become a housemaid at Woodruff's wife and daughter, and to keep the judge's bed warm. Once Woodruff started losing interest, Chloe was afraid of losing her position and began to eavesdrop on the family. Chloe was caught, and the Woodruff has cut off her ears as a punishment. She wore a green turban after the incident to cover her ears. Fearing the loss of her status now even more, Chloe devised a plan. She would grind up poisonous leaves into a cake and serve the dessert to the family. They would then get sick and she would nurse them back to health with the antidote. Her plan backfired. The children immediately became violently ill from the poison and died. Chloe, now racked with guilt, confessed to her friends, who then promptly turned on her, dragged her from her bed in the middle of the night and hanged her. Modern visitors to the Myrtles plantation have reported seeing a figure of a woman wearing a green turban walking the grounds. The house now has Halloween tours where people claim to feel a spooky presence surrounding them. In Savannah, Georgia, there is an 18th century three-story home called Hampton Lilliebridge House. The home miraculously, or supernaturally, survived Savannah's Great Fire in 1820, which destroyed many surrounding homes. The house has a dark past. The original owner, Hampton Lilliebridge, died in the house. Later, a sailor renting out one of the house's rooms hanged himself from the ceiling. After this, a construction worker was crushed to death while performing renovations on the house. The house has even been exorcised by a priest. In 1912, in Villisca, Iowa, the Moore family were murdered while they slept. The killer chopped every member up with an axe, ran away, and was never seen again. The house is still standing, and it was preserved as a museum for ghost tours. Visitors of the Moore house claim they can hear creaking floorboards and the sounds of children crying. In Ireland during the 1600s, a beautiful red-headed girl named Moira Rua inherited a vast fortune. She and her second husband, Conor O'Brien, then built a massive estate known as Lamanna Castle. After O'Brien died in battle, Rua knew that the only way to support her castle and 11 children was to marry a third man, John Cooper, who worked for the infamous political leader Oliver Cromwell. Locals were jealous that Moira, who they called Red Mary, was able to maintain her wealth and status, and were angry that she had married someone connected to Cromwell. Rumours began to spread that Rua was a black widow who had killed 25 husbands in order to keep their money. Other rumours claimed that she had abused her housekeepers. A group of local men kidnapped Rua and trapped her inside the hollow of a tree, where she screamed for help that never came. She starved to death inside the tree before her body was discovered. Even to this day, people say that they can see the ghost of a red-headed woman walking through Lamanna Castle. Some say that a home at 14 West 10th Street in New York City is haunted. It's been nicknamed the House of Death. In the 1960s, actress Jan Bryant Bartell bought the house. After moving in, Bartell almost immediately began feeling icy hands on the back of her neck and could smell a rotting corpse. Her dogs began to growl at an invisible enemy in the room, and one of the dogs died soon afterwards. Bartell decided to do some research on the history of the new house and discovered that multiple people were murdered or committed suicide there over the years. She hired a psychic to dig deeper. Upon communing, the medium went limp and claimed that the bodies of the children were buried under the floorboards and that multiple ghosts from various generations were haunting the residence. Bartell fled the house and wrote of her experience in Spindrift, Spray from the Psychic Sea. A month later, Bartell was dead from an apparent suicide. The tragedies didn't stop there. In the 1980s, a new family moved in. The father, attorney Joel Steinberg, killed his 6-year-old daughter. Okay, I'm done. That's enough of the depressing stuff. Let's go to the graveyard facts, because there are some interesting graveyard facts. Sayings on gravestones are called epitaphs. Epitaphs are, in colonial America, once administered warnings about the certainty of death and often gave hints of the person who may have caused the death. As attitudes towards death changed, epitaphs changed to convey hope and or grief, and some are even humorous. Example, I told you I was sick. Alright. If you see the word WOW on a gravestone, W-O-W, you have found the burial place of a former member of the Woodmen of the World, an American fraternal insurance company who is said to have given widows $100 and a free gravestone if the company logo was put on the stone. The WOW emblem is a sawed-off tree stump, often with a mallet or beetle, an axe, and a wedge. The type of stone used for gravestone can reveal wealth or military affiliation. American gravestones are typically made from granite, marble, limestone, sandstone, slate, quartzite, schist, wood, or even petrified wood. Throughout history, wealthy families often opted for marble and granite, while poorer families often selected headstones made from sandstone, lime, or wood. Government-issued military gravestones are uniform in design and made of marble, bronze, or granite. Many gravestones faced east. An east-west orientation for gravestones is the most common throughout the world. Early American settlers wanted their feet pointing east and their heads pointing west, so they were ready to rise up and face the sun of a new day when they hoped to be reborn. When the rural cemetery movement became popular in the 1830s, graveyards were constructed with windy roads, hilly terrain, and stones facing different directions. Look closely at gravestones and you'll see symbols are everywhere. The winged hourglass tells us that time flies. The hourglass on its side indicates time stopped for the dead. A broken flower or tree symbolizes a life cut short. Hands in prayer position can signify devotion, and a hand pointing down can indicate sudden death. A handshake can reflect clasped hands of a couple to be reunited in death. Lambs are often found on gravestones of children. Detailed carved figurines of family dogs are often found atop graves of their human friends. Although more uncommon, roosters atop a stone are usually thought to be symbolic of Judgment Day. Obelisks are a common feature in many cemeteries. Beginning in the 1840s, obelisk-shaped stones began appearing in American graveyards. There is a renewed interest in Egyptian culture. Obelisks with uplifting lines can be placed in small areas, were thought to be patriotic and were less costly than large and elaborate sculpted monuments. Besides being a place to bury the deceased, cemeteries are gathering spots and places to honour and connect with the dead, whether it's a family member or famous people. Some people bring picnics when they visit. West Cemetery in Amherst, MA. Is that Minnesota? No, it's not Minnesota. Anyway. It's visited by thousands of people every year who seek out the final resting place for poet Emily Dickinson, for example. Besides being the final resting place for many Hollywood celebrities, Forest Lawn in Southern California features a museum with rotating exhibits and special art, museum, and educational events. People tour the Lexington Cemetery in Lexington, Kentucky for its natural beauty, and Arlington National Cemetery is considered a major national tourism attraction for those wishing to see the tomb of the unknown soldier, the John F. Kennedy gravesite, and many other significant memorials. Even without these types of features, most cemeteries have visiting hours for the living. Prepare to take photos, not charcoal rubbings. Most cemeteries today discourage visitors from creating paper or charcoal rubbings of gravestones. Due to the age and acid rain, many stones have eroded, and gravestones today are handled with kid gloves to preserve the information. Visitors are encouraged to take all the photos they want, but resist handling gravestones, especially older ones. Alright, let's see if we've got some more. The difference between a graveyard and a cemetery is that a graveyard adjoins a church, whereas a cemetery does not. You can also bury ashes in a cemetery. I did not know that. Ben & Jerry's has a flavour graveyard, where there are tombstones for earlier flavours that are no longer sold. New York Washington Square Park used to be a graveyard, and it's believed over 2,000 are still buried there. Sorry, it is believed over 20,000 there are still buried there. That's very bad English. 20,000 people still buried in Washington Square Park. Everest is what's called the graveyard in the clouds, which is from hikers dying that haven't been found or unable to be recovered, and from time to time their bodies reappear after a glacier move or avalanche. Ant colonies and beehives are graveyards, and special undertaker ants and bees are there to collect the dead. There is a graveyard in Luxembourg where American soldiers, including George S. Patton, all have white cross headstones, while a graveyard for German soldiers across have dark cross headstones. There is an old Soviet pilot's graveyard with old aircraft tail fins outside of a now NATO base in the Baltic states, where NATO aircraft currently fly air policing missions against Russian aircraft. During the 1800s in Holland, the graves of Protestants and Catholics were placed in separate graveyards. However, a couple found their way to be near one another again, even if their beliefs differed. Arlington National Cemetery began where Robert E. Lee lived prior to the Civil War. The Union occupied his estate, and to keep Lee from wanting to return, turned it into a graveyard. Taphophiles are people obsessed with graveyards. In the 1850s, London closed its graveyards, and Parliament decided a new company could transport all of the dead out of the city on a dedicated railway. There is an abandoned graveyard in extremely large sculptures of 43 US presidents. Okay. The graveyard of St. Peter's Church in Liverpool, where John Lennon and Paul McCartney first met, contains the gravestone of an individual named Eleanor Rigby. Leakin Park is called as a large unregistered graveyard. Approximately 67 bodies have been found so far in the area. In Nouadhibou, Mauritania, there is the largest ship graveyard in the world. Personally designed and carved, John Rennie's gravestone in Wales, St. Mary's Priory Church, reads, "Here lies John Rennie, 46,000 different ways," as it's a 485-letter acrostic puzzle. There is a phallic and female breast graveyard. Okay. Conservationists found the bones of at least 15 people in the basement of a house belonging to Ben Franklin, most likely people smuggled from graveyards for the illegal anatomy school. Wales has an underwater graveyard along with the school, a post office and other flooded structures and farmlands. Okay. A cenotaph is a marker or monument erected to honour a person whose remains are elsewhere. They may also be a marker to the initial grave site of the person who has been reinterred somewhere else. An epitaph is a phrase, poem or statement inscribed on the gravestone. The safety coffin. In the 18th and 19th centuries, an anxiety of being buried alive was elevated to new heights. With cholera and yellow fever epidemics and less than ideal medical care, people feared premature burial. To combat this, safety coffins were invented. These coffins came equipped with a bell that would ring if it found themselves in the most unpleasant situation. Often fresh air came in through a hatch as well. There was no documented cases that anyone ever needed the bell. And we'll finish up with this because this is like l'amour of Mrs. Coffee's. The Mort Safe. In 1816, the Mort Safe was invented to keep out grave robbers and resurrectionists who supplied medical anatomy schools with bodies. Oh, and ghouls live in graveyards where they consume human flesh. Okay. Alright, look, it was hopefully light enough that you're not going to take it overly serious. I hope you enjoyed this little house and the little gravestones, and I would hope not to live quite so close to some gravestones if I had some kind of manor like that. Alright, thank you for watching, and I will talk to you all soon. Bye for now.